Hi, this lesson is going to take you through interpreting poetic devices for the poem, "The World is Not a Pleasant Place to Be." So you're going to need to find your Interpreting Poetic Devices packet. There are 2 pages attached together, and we're going to take a look at what's technically the 3rd page. So on the front side of the 2nd page. In class, we started to or did complete the 1st page based on the poem The Pasture. The backside is for the poem A Time to Talk, which we may or may not have completed yet, depending on your group. I had intended to do this lesson in class with you, and some of you missed that because I'm home with a sick kid today. So we're going to do this through a video, whether you are completing it during the same week or the following week before this packet is due. So let's start with this poem. You're also going to want your book handy so that you can take a look. And I have the pages here as well. So I just have to remember that I got to do a new share though. So if you take a look at the poem, we can see here the title, "The World is Not a Pleasant Place to Be," and our author is by Nikki Giovanni. So we're going to go back to our worksheet and we're going to put that information in there. I'm going to get rid of the underline. The world is not a pleasant place to be. Stays in the quotation marks because poems go into quotation marks. And then our author is Nikki Giovanni. Okay, so this one is set up similar to how we had the last one, where we see sound device and there are 2 boxes there. And then the next box is for punctuation and the last box is for words or phrases. One thing that I did notice as I was just looking over that poem is there may not be actually 2 sound devices, but we are going to find another type of figurative language. So I want to remind you first that our sound devices are rhyme. There's, rhythm and meter, which is kind of hard to put into our chart. And then our other we have 2 figurative language that count as sound devices, and those are alliteration and onomatopoeia. So alliteration being the repetition of beginning consonant sounds, and onomatopoeia being our words that imitate sounds. So let's read the poem. And while I'm reading it to you, I want you to be looking for those sound devices. The World is Not a Pleasant Place to Be by Nikki Giovanni. The world is not a pleasant place to be without someone to hold and be held by. A river would stop its flow if only a stream were there to receive it. An ocean would never laugh if clouds weren't there to kiss her tears. The world is not a pleasant place to be without someone. All right. I did just think of something that could count as another sound device, and that's the idea of repetition, repeating certain words or phrases, and that could fit into either one of our boxes. So I wanted to point out that you're going to possibly be writing an essay about one of these poems. So the examples that you pull in are going to be the ones that you're going to want to write about. So there's a couple ways to fill out the chart, and I'm going to try to guide you through it. And you can pick, sometimes decide, do you want to do the same thing as me? So the first thing that I want you to look for is alliteration. So repetition of beginning consonant sounds in our words here. And there's not a lot, but there is an example. So take a look and think about it. Okay, I'm going to put in the box what the sound device is, and we're looking for alliteration. And I believe, I should have checked the line number before I left it. It's in a couple lines actually. Yep, it is line 1 and line 12. One and 12, and I'm going to put it in there, and we have pleasant place. So once again, I want you to take this last box, I'm not going to fill that in. This is your thinking. You're going to put down what it represents or what your inference is, particularly about why the poet would choose to emphasize pleasant place. And I want to point out, so our title is The World is Not a Pleasant Place to Be. However, the emphasis is on those particular words, pleasant place. So she does mention without blank. So it can be a pleasant place when these other things are in place. But put down, what is your inference? Why do you think the poet chose to emphasize pleasant place? What does it mean? Right, I'm going to skip over the second box. I'm going to go to punctuation. And you might be thinking, what punctuation? Right? There is no punctuation in the poem. Not only is there no punctuation, but within the poem itself, there is also no capitalization. So remember, we've talked about how the rules of poetry are very different than our typical writing rules. The poet probably has a very good reason for completely leaving out the punctuation, and definitely a good reason for leaving out the capitalization. So remember we talked about how when you read a poem aloud, the punctuation indicates when you should stop. So when I read it, there really were no pauses except between our stanzas. The world is not a pleasant place to be without someone to hold and be held by. A river would stop its flow if only a stream were there to receive it. An ocean would never laugh if clouds were there to kiss her tears. The world is not a pleasant place to be without someone. So by continuing to read those lines, you get the whole meaning of the stanza, not just that negative at the beginning. All right, so let's go back to your chart. And we're going to fill in punctuation, and we'll simply put, there isn't any punctuation the entire poem. And then this last inference, why? Why do you think the poet left out and there is no punctuation in the poem? All right. I would like us to, instead of a sound device, we're going to look for a different figurative language. And I apologize that I have it in the chart wrong, but I want us to look for personification. There are 2 examples of personification in this poem. And I want to remind you that personification is when you give a human quality to a non-human thing. I lied, there's only 1 example of personification. We're looking in the 3rd stanza. An ocean would never laugh. Well, I guess there's 2. If clouds weren't there to kiss her tears. So the ocean laughing and the clouds kissing. Okay, so we're taking a look at, we're going to put down lines 8 through 10 into our chart. Eight through 10, the ocean would never laugh if the clouds, there to kiss I have it memorized. Their tears, but I can't remember if that's the correct pronoun. Let's take a look. I have to fix it. Her tears. An ocean would never laugh if clouds weren't there to kiss her tears. So let me fix my wording. Get rid of the ocean would never laugh if clouds weren't there to kiss her tears. All right, so what does this mean? This really gets to the heart of the message, right? So, there wouldn't be happiness if somebody wasn't out there to help comfort you, perhaps, something along those lines. So fill in what you think that particular line means. All right, now I've started to fill in for words or phrases, and technically we could have flip-flopped the personification and the repetition boxes because I said earlier, repetition could fit in as a sound device, and now I screwed it up again, but at least we have the information in there. So repetition are words, phrases, or lines that are repeated throughout a poem. So let's take a look back at the poem. What is it that is repeated? The world is not a pleasant place to be. So in the first stanza, she continues that without someone to hold and be held by. In the last stanza, she says to be without someone. So once again, similar to other poems, of the idea of needing another person, not being alone. So line 1 and I think it's 13. I'll double check in a second. The world is not a pleasant place to be. Now, when you explain that over here, that is your ideas, but remember that she has a reasoning when it's not a pleasant place to be. And you should be following her ideas here of why it's not pleasant. So you might have other ideas, the world isn't very pleasant because, but stick to the poem and go in with her reasoning as to why it's not a pleasant place to be. Perhaps because when you're lonely or when you don't have somebody with you, etc. The last thing to do with each of our poems is then to put in the main message or theme of this poem. And I want to remind you that this is not a summary of the poem. This is the point that you're supposed to take away. What is the poet the speaker trying to say to you? What is it that we can learn about life and the meaning that we can take away from it? I highly recommend that you look over your explanations on the end. Can you come up with some kind of a moral from what you have within there? Taking a look at those pieces. What is the main thing that she's trying to say? As we look at this last one, we know the world is not a pleasant place to be without somebody. We might say something like the main message of the poem is, it is important to have people. I cannot type today. People in your life. Now, you don't have to take my theme. Remember that any theme can be valid if you're able to prove it with evidence from the poem. So you pick, maybe you have a different message. Just make sure that it is a message, some kind of advice that the poet is giving us. And it's not, this is what the poem's about. Okay. All right. That's it for this particular poem. And please make sure that you check back for the ones we were not able to get to in class. I will have videos for both A Time to Talk and for To You.